Today I'm going to tell a little bit of the story of how I went from living in this 40 square foot box in a trailer home as a kid to gallivanting the globe and telling stories in places like Ukraine during the war, and what that taught me about myself. When I was younger, I had this bunk bed on this half of the room that my brother and I put this ghetto ass divider in, and on the top bunk I put wood laid down. I put a table on it. I had a corner shelf with my TV, the PlayStation, and I created my own world up there. It was this form of adventure and exploration that I continued to see through my entire life, really. Now, fast forwarding to post-college football, I had an opportunity to continue playing football overseas in Australia and taste this flavor of wanderlust that was planted in that trailer house. What I didn't foresee happening when I went over to Australia was this desire to share stories, this desire to start shooting photos and videos and telling my story as it was unfolding. But once I got a hold of my first camera, I saw people like Ali Abdaal and Casey Neistat and Yestery and wanted to create this combination of all of them in my own flavor and tell stories online. Partially because I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be heard, and partially because I love the idea of telling stories, and I'm fascinated by watching how other people live this thing we call life with no rule book and sharing that. So following Australia, I moved to Brazil for a little while, came back to the United States, lived in my dad's old truck for 6 months, running all over the country. And then I proceeded to go to Peru and Colombia and Haiti and Paris and experience this life of highs of being at Paris Fashion Week and then a few weeks later hiking Machu Picchu, and it was amazing. So I started to gallivant the globe. I went to Paris Fashion Week and shot photos in the streets out there of models all over the city. I went to Peru and hiked Machu Picchu and rode the train up there because it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life. I went to Kenya and did the Masai Mara and saw the safari and tried to start a nonprofit. I just went after it left and right, trying to find the pockets of the world that interested me and trying to find the pockets of myself that also interested me. And then I was about 2 years into this adventure and I ended up buying a ticket to Budapest, Hungary, because I wanted to drive over into Ukraine to tell stories on the ground during the war. I was so anxious before going. I remember posting about it and raising money for it, and the whole spectrum of comments came in on Facebook, especially from "you're a legend" to "I hope your death is fast." The whole gamut. People I didn't even know, people I did know. My own mom was like, "I hope you have money for your funeral because I can't afford it." And my internal world was spinning. Even when I had parsed through these comments one by one and given a video explanation, I was still on the plane flying over to Hungary thinking, what the fuck am I doing? Maybe not even thinking it so much, but feeling it. Internally, my body was vibrating. And truthfully, it wasn't until driving across the border with my camera and all my equipment, getting into Ukraine, that it settled, where I could tell I had made the right decision for me. And truthfully, that was the first thing I learned, was that I can trust myself. I can trust my internal guide to navigate me if I really listen to where I'm supposed to be. Not where everybody else thinks I'm supposed to be, but where I know that I'm supposed to be. Or maybe a better way to put it is where I get to be. What prompted me to go to Ukraine was the same internal voice that prompted me to go to Haiti. It was the same feeling, just a different adventure. And the feeling that I had when I got to the small town in Haiti was the same feeling that I had when I drove across the border into Ukraine. It was the feeling of, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. The second thing that I learned about myself is that I can own my own gold. I can own my own power. And one of those is telling sensitive stories. One of the comments that I remember reading time and time again is, who do you think you are? Ukrainians can tell their own story. They have their own abilities. This is white savior complex. And I can see the value in the comments. And honestly, I think there is a slice of truth there, that I was playing into some of those dynamics and probably will forever be. It's going to be a dance that I find myself in time and time again. My hope is that it's just less and less. That's my vision. That's my goal. But my goal in this, one of my highly trained skills is telling sensitive stories. There's a unique skill set that I've developed after traveling to 5 of the 7 continents and telling stories with people in different languages and different backgrounds and different cultures that I've acquired to do this, and I do it well. There's one story that I remember in specific that also brings this idea to light for me. As I was doing a client project in Bosnia, and we were at this older woman's house who had lived in this small town in Bosnia for years. Her daughter was a part of this school program where they were getting funding, and that's the story I was there kind of telling was what home and life looked like for this family and what it meant for the student to get this scholarship opportunity to go to school to create a better future for themselves, whatever better means to them. But what I remember was filming with this woman outside of her house and just asking her questions about the garden, asking her questions about herself that didn't pertain at all to the project. And the woman that had hired me started to feel irritated. She's like, what are we doing here? But then slowly realized that I was just creating a relationship with this woman, creating a relationship for her in the camera before asking things that were sensitive, that were about the war, that were about hard times for her. We had just met and I didn't want to stick my camera in her face and start asking these hard questions because that's not safe for a lot of people. And that's something I've learned along the way. That's part of this skill set that I've acquired. The third thing that I learned about myself is I'm not perfect and I never will be. Like I was just saying, there's a dynamic here, there's a shadow here for me that will always exist on some level of the spectrum. My main aim, my main goal, my main vision is to continue minimizing it while not running from it. Whether it's my privilege in being able to take my camera and just fly around the globe and tell stories, or being white, or having a United States passport. There are all sorts of shadows here, and there will forever be levels of ignorance that I hold to my own shadows that I'll forever be unpacking. I'm not perfect, and I never will be, but I'm not gonna let that stop me from doing things that set my soul on fire. I mean, I'm sitting in front of myself, filming a video with a camera that's showing me back to myself. Like there's always going to be some level of self-obsession, conceitedness within that, or else I probably wouldn't do it. Again, the goal is that that's just not in the driver's seat. In the driver's seat is my desire to tell stories that change people's lives or to offer information that helps people in their daily lives, to give inspiration to others, to use this skill set in a way that's additive and not detractive like so much of media in my judgment is. The fourth thing I learned about myself and about humans is that we all have the ability to transform pain into power. There's always a razor blade in my judgment. I try not to use absolutes, but it really feels true for this. There's a razor blade between victim and empowerment. When something difficult happens to us, we have choices to make. There's a whole spectrum, but we can easily fall to the victim side, or we can consciously choose to fall to the empowered side. When I was in Ukraine on the ground, there was this group that we basically just accidentally ran into because we typed in this coffee shop in Google Maps, and Google Maps took us down this alleyway to what it thought was a coffee shop, but was a rec center with a coffee shop in it that they had actually completely shut down to be a refugee camp during the war. Basically, this family, this group that was running this refugee camp said, yes, our country is at war. Yes, it is distressed. Yes, we're sleeping less. Our life is constantly on the line, but they consciously chose to empower themselves, use what they had around them to offer to those coming from the east, coming from the front lines, to have a landing place in transit so they could be safe for a night or two and find their way out of the country after that. Watching the way that people in one of the most distressed times, if not the most distressed time of their entire life, use it as a catalyst to empower themselves was something that I can never unsee, and always a reference point for me when I'm feeling like, wow, I want to be a victim here. I want to feel sorry for myself. There's always an experiential reference point of these people that said, hey, why don't you just empower yourself instead? I hope something in there resonated with you. I am finding my way back on this platform in a new evolution of life, in a new lifestyle, and figuring out how to tell stories again. I should say figuring out how to tell stories in this version of myself. And for today, that's where we're landing. I'll see you in the next one.